And thank you all so much for listening to Mid Mornings with Amy. And we have a lot to talk about this morning because we have two guests in the studio. We have from the Department of Fish and Wildlife, John Williams. He is the district biologist for the Southeastern Fishery District, and Danny Parks. He is a fishery technician. And we're going to talk about what the department in general does. And there's about 10 district offices in the state of Kentucky with the Department of Fish and Wildlife, and I think most people have heard of you all, but we're going to talk specifically about some of the things that you can help people with. And John, let's start off by talking about some things you all are recently working on, some things you have recently done. You mentioned that you've stocked Laurel Lake. What exactly does that mean?
Right. Part of our job is we stock various fish species in the lakes in the district that we cover, and so our major lakes in the area that I cover are Lake Cumberland, Laurel Lake, Dale Hollow, Wood Creek Lake, and essentially we cover a 15-county area in southeast Kentucky, and certain species we stock in each of those lakes. And for example, here in Somerset, Lake Cumberland, we stock striped bass and walleye each year. Below Wolf Creek Dam, we stock trout each year. Laurel Lake, we stock walleye. Occasionally we stock largemouth bass. In the past, we've stocked crappie. We also stock rainbow trout each year. So essentially, we try to provide fish for the anglers to catch in each of our major reservoirs.
When you stock lakes, are with the different types of fish, are these for fishing purposes or for wildlife purposes? Why do you stock the lakes?
Right, they are for fishing purposes. Some fish don't reproduce at all or very well in some of the lakes. So what we do is try to supplement the population. And we stock, most of the fish we stock are what's called fingerling fish, which are 2 or 3 inches long. They're more cost effective to raise just to a small size and then stock them in the lake, and then they grow to a larger size within a few years that anglers would find desirable to catch.
The Lake Cumberland Dam has gone through some repairs over the past several years. How has that affected the work that you all have been able to do?
Right, it's really been a dramatic effect. Of course, they started, I think, in 2007, and they lowered the lake 43 feet below normal summer pool to work on the dam and fix the leaks. And all that work's been completed now, and the lake is going to come back to normal elevation, as far as I know, this year. So while it was down, we did have quite a few problems, especially with the lowered lake water. You had less cool water habitat for certain fish, and it really negatively affected our striped bass and walleye populations. But we think now with the full lake, water conditions for those fish should be better. There will be more cool water habitat for those fish, so we expect those fisheries to improve in the next several years.
We live in an area where a lot of people love to fish and hunt, so the jobs that you all do are very important. Danny, we're going to make you talk this morning. Let's talk about the bald eagle survey that you all are getting ready to start.
Yes, we'll be doing that tomorrow. We're supposed to meet up with the Forest Service around 10 o'clock, and then we'll do half the lake, and then they'll do half the lake.
And when you say do half the lake, what are you doing there?
You basically just drive around and in a boat, and you just count the bald eagles. And then at the end of the day, you get back up with the Forest Service and see how many they got on their half of the lake, and then we'll tell them how many we got on our half.
Do we have, and you may not know this since you haven't done the survey yet, but do we have a lot of bald eagle population in this part of Kentucky?
Yes. We even got a nest where they nest at Laurel Lake.
You all also can help people with permits for hunting and for fishing. How does that work? If people want to hunt and fish, they do have to be licensed, right, and have permits. And how can your office help them with that?
That's correct. To hunt or fish or trap or about any outdoor activity involving fish or wildlife, you have to be permitted through our office. And you can come by. In fact, we have a new office location here in Somerset. We recently moved in the past year to Somerset. So if any of you are familiar with the old Forest Service building it's 135 Realty Lane in Somerset, you can come by our office. We've got a lot of literature available that tells about how you can purchase your hunting and fishing licenses. You can also go online at our website and purchase the licenses at fw.ky.gov, or basically any bait vendor or Walmart, any of those major stores, you can purchase licenses through those stores.
your website, you mentioned your website. It's very informative, and again, it's fw.ky.gov, and we will put that on our Facebook page at Somerset 106 for people to visit. But if anyone has any questions about the specifics of hunting permits and fishing permits, they can find all of that information on your website, and like you mentioned, they can actually get the permit online. And I'm also glad you mentioned your office change, because you all have been in Williamsburg for a long time, and I think about a year ago you came over here. So Somerset now has a Department of Fish and Wildlife office.
That's correct. And of course, we work in the fisheries division, but also in that office we have a wildlife biologist that's essentially my counterpart for the wildlife division. And we also have a state division of forestry, another agency, but they have office space in that building, and occasionally we have some law enforcement personnel in that building. So you should be able to come by, and unless we're out in the field doing work, someone will be there to assist you, whether you have a fisheries question or wildlife question or forestry question.
What are some tips and some advice that John and Danny, you all would give hunters and fishers in Kentucky? What are things they need to remember?
Well, we always talk about safety for one thing. When you're out hunting, especially, have firearms, you need to be aware of which way you're pointing the gun, and be safe that way. And obviously, when you're on the water, I always recommend wearing life jackets, especially this time of year when it's really cold. And if something happened, you were falling out of the boat, without a life jacket, you'd have very little chance of surviving. So, safety is very important. We also encourage everyone to, buy their license. Buy their licenses. It's a lot cheaper to buy the license than to pay the fine for not having one. And of course, when you do buy a license, you actually help the resource, because we get funding through the sale of hunting and fishing licenses. So that's very important.
Do you all monitor the permits and the license? Do you check for that?
We don't specifically, but we have a law enforcement division that their job is to make sure that people are in compliance with whatever regulation we have. The fish has got to be a certain size to be able to keep them. You can only keep so many, and they make sure that you have the proper license that you should have for taking the fish and game.
When we come back, we're going to talk about some things that the Department of Fish and Wildlife does not do, because I'm sure you all get a lot of calls being asked to do things that you all cannot take care of. So we'll talk about that when we come back. We're talking with John Williams and Danny Parks this morning with the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife. We're in the studio with John Williams and Danny Parks with the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife. Their office is now here in Somerset, been here for about a year. And we've been talking about some of the things that people can call your office and use you for, some of the things that you all do on a daily basis, but there are some things that people call your office for help with that you are not able to help with. So what are some calls that you get from people asking for you to do things that you can't directly help with? Because we don't want people calling you when you can't help. We want them to call you for things that you can help them with.
Right. We get some interesting calls, and a lot of people have nuisance wildlife, and we can help quite a bit with a lot of those requests. One thing our agency is primarily a game animals and fish, sport fish, but we do also have a non-game division that can help with problems like if you've got bats in your attic. We won't actually physically come out and remove them or anything like that. And that's some of the requests we get, is actually remove wildlife, but we will give advice until the homeowner or the problem that's having or the person that's having a problem with wildlife. Some measures they can take to alleviate the problem.
And you are also not able to come and pick up animals from the road if they have been ran over. Right.
We get a lot of calls on, dead deer on the highway. It's my understanding that the highway department, if it's actually in the road or in the right of way, they will come remove the animal, but we don't come out and remove the animal.
Where are some of the best places to fish in this area? Because we do, as we said earlier, have a lot of people who love to fish. Where are some of the best lakes and places to go?
Right. I think we're kind of blessed here in the southeastern part of the state with a lot of different fishing opportunities. And we have a lot of different varieties of water bodies that people can fish. If you like to fish large reservoirs, we have Lake Cumberland, Laurel Lake, Dale Hollow. And then we have a series of smaller lakes. If you want to kind of get away from the crowds, you can go to like Wood Creek Lake in London. We have Lake Linville near Mount Vernon, Burt Combs Lake over in Clay counties. And then we have a variety of streams and rivers. Our district primarily falls within the Cumberland River drainage, so the Cumberland River, both both above the falls and below the falls. It flows into Lake Cumberland's good areas, a variety of streams. And then, of course, we have one of the best trout fisheries in the region below Wolf Creek Dam. That's kind of a cold water habitat for the trout. So regardless of what kind of fish you want to fish for, you can find pretty much a variety in the southeastern part of the state.
I'm sure that you all also deal with a lot of people who are violating the regulations of hunting season or fishing season. If someone is out on the lake, for example, and they notice a violation taking place because we want to take care of our wildlife, what is the best way for them to reach you all to let you know that that is happening?
Right. We do get calls occasionally that people have witnessed some illegal activity, and usually it's something that happened a week or two ago, and obviously that doesn't help us. But now with almost everyone has a cell phone, and so if you see any illegal activity, you can call our 1-800 number in Frankfort. It's 1-800-25-ALERT, 1-800-858-1549, and report any fish and wildlife violation, and they can send out an officer that's on duty to investigate that.
You will also do a lot of work in the school systems, educating school children about what you do and about fishing and about hunting. Danny, talk about some of the work that you do with the schools and with the kids.
Well, sometimes when the teachers calls, we bring in different types of fish, and we try to show them the difference between, the bass, the bluegill, and the fish that they would catch in their area. And we also talk about the job opportunities there is out there for everybody. If you come in our office, we got a brochure that talks about the different types of jobs and what kind of qualifications you got to have for that job.
What about the Salado Center in Frankfort? For those who might not be familiar with that, that is a part of the Department of Fish and Wildlife in your office. What is that?
Well, it's almost like a zoo. It's you go up there and they've got elk, the bald eagle, the bobcat. They've got live snakes, fish. I think they got a beehive. They even have a live stream. I think Toyota donated money to do for them.
So a nice place to take kids for maybe a field trip or a family. Take them to the Salado Center in Frankfort. Nice. We've talked about some fish and some animals that we like to have in our area, but let's talk about some animals that might be coming in, some wildlife that might be coming into our area that we don't want here. Do we have any problems like that?
We do have a little bit of problem in the state. Some of you may have heard of Asian carp, silver and bighead carp, which are a nuisance or exotic species that's invaded the state, and they can compete with the food source for our young sport fish, so they're potentially could be very harmful. But as of right now, they're more in the western part of the state. We haven't really seen any in our area, and we need to caution people. And a few years ago, we had what's called zebra mussels, which is another invasive exotic species that interferes with our native mussel populations. And those can be transported by boats, anglers going from one water body to another. So we always caution people to make sure that you're not transporting something in your live well or bait well and transferring it from one water body to another, because a lot of the exotic species get transferred that way.
That's good advice. We're talking this morning with John Williams and Danny Parks with the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife, and we'll wrap up with John and Danny when we come back on Mid Mornings with Amy.